Have you watched the previous episode's video? Welcome to the story of this episode, Chapter 30, Revelations and Breakthroughs in Coma. After Sumu fell into a coma, his consciousness seemed to drift in a boundless and dark void, with no direction and no end. Suddenly, a bright and gentle light, like a sharp sword, split through the darkness. An ancient, powerful being in a white robe appeared in his consciousness. The ancient, powerful being had a kind face, but his eyes revealed boundless wisdom and majesty, as if he could see through every corner of Sumu's heart. Child, you bear the heavy responsibility of repairing this plane. Never give up easily. The ancient, powerful being's voice, like a great bell, echoed in Sumu's consciousness. Every word seemed to contain boundless power, giving Sumu's spirit a boost. Startled, Sumu quickly said, "Senior, I've tried my best, but the repair of the spiritual power core is really fraught with difficulties. I don't know what to do." There was a hint of helplessness and confusion in his voice, which was particularly clear in this dark consciousness space. The ancient powerful being smiled slightly and said, "Repairing the spiritual power core requires not only powerful spiritual power, but also a deep understanding and control of spiritual power. Although you have integrated the reverse, time spiritual power with your own spiritual power, you haven't grasped the essence yet." After saying that, the ancient powerful being stretched out his finger and gently flicked it. A ray of light shot towards Sumu like a shooting star. Sumu felt a powerful flood of information pouring into his mind. It contained advanced techniques for the use of spiritual power and how to achieve a deeper integration with the reverse, time spiritual power. These pieces of information, like fragments of a jigsaw puzzle, quickly formed a complete picture in Sumu's mind, raising his understanding of spiritual power to a whole new level. Remember, reverse, time spiritual power is not just a simple force, but a mysterious power that can change the rules of time. You need to feel its resonance with other spiritual powers with your heart and find the balance between them, the ancient powerful being said earnestly. His voice seemed to have a kind of magic, making Sumu firmly remember every word. Suddenly enlightened, Sumu bowed deeply to the ancient powerful being in his consciousness and said, "Thank you, Senor, for your guidance. I will surely do my best." His heart was filled with gratitude, and new hope ignited within him. The figure of the ancient powerful being gradually dissipated, and Sumu woke up from his coma. He felt as if he had been reborn, with a qualitative leap in his understanding and control of spiritual power. Sumu looked at the spiritual power core suspended in the air. Although most of the cracks on the spiritual power core had healed at this time, there were still several large cracks remaining, and the light still flickered unsteadily, as if telling the trauma it had suffered before. Sumu took a deep breath, circulated the spiritual power in his body, and tried to repair the spiritual power core again. This time, instead of blindly injecting spiritual power, he calmed down, felt the flow of the reverse, time spiritual power and his own spiritual power, and searched for the resonance point between them. Sumu slowly stretched out his hands and gently guided the spiritual power towards the spiritual power core. He could feel that the reverse, time spiritual power, as if having a life of its own, began to have a subtle interaction with the spiritual power in the spiritual power core. As the spiritual power was injected, the several large cracks began to heal slowly, and the light of the spiritual power core gradually stabilized. However, just as the repair was about to be completed, the spiritual power core suddenly vibrated violently, and a powerful counter, shock force rushed towards Sumu. Sumu was prepared. He quickly circulated the reverse, time spiritual power, and formed a protective barrier in front of him to resist this counter, shock force. Sumu didn't back down. He increased the output of spiritual power and continued to repair the spiritual power core. With his unremitting efforts, the last few cracks finally healed completely, and the spiritual power core bloomed with a dazzling light, illuminating the entire space. After the spiritual power core was repaired, the whole space trembled. A powerful and harmonious spiritual power fluctuation spread out in all directions, centered on the spiritual power core. Sensing this change in spiritual power, Sumu's heart was filled with joy and relief. He knew that his efforts had not been in vain. As the spiritual power core returned to normal, the originally dim runes and crystals in the castle regained their luster, and time also seemed to start showing signs of glowing. Sumu could see the previously stationary dust slowly falling, and the pictures on the walls became more vivid, as if the whole world was gradually waking up. However, before Sumu could fully savor the joy of success, suddenly, a strong space-time fluctuation came out from the spiritual power core. This fluctuation quickly spread throughout the plane, triggering a series of chain reactions. The space began to distort, and cracks appeared all around, as if the entire plane was on the verge of collapse. Startled, Sumu realized that although he had repaired the spiritual power core, it might have triggered other unknown problems. Just then, the figure of the guardian appeared beside him, looking solemn, and said, "Repairing the spiritual power core has broken the originally fragile balance of the plane. We must stabilize the situation as soon as possible, or the entire plane will be destroyed." Sumu nodded. Aware of the urgency of the situation, he immediately asked, "What should we do?" The guardian pondered for a moment and said, "After the spiritual power core is repaired, the powerful spiritual power it releases needs to be guided and balanced. You need to use the special properties of the reverse, time spiritual power to guide this spiritual power into the key nodes of the plane to stabilize time and space." Without any hesitation, Sumo concentrated, circulated the reverse, time spiritual power, and tried to establish a connection with the powerful spiritual power released by the spiritual power core. This time, with the revelations given by the ancient powerful being during his coma, he was more proficient in controlling the reverse, time spiritual power. The reverse, time spiritual power was like an invisible silk thread, slowly winding around that powerful spiritual power. Sumu carefully guided them to flow towards the key nodes of the plane. During this process, he could clearly feel the space-time fluctuations of the plane gradually weakening, but guiding each part of the spiritual power consumed a huge amount of his energy. As the spiritual power was gradually guided, the space distortion of the plane began to recover slowly, and the cracks also gradually healed. However, just as the guidance was about to be completed, a powerful resistance suddenly appeared, preventing the further flow of spiritual power. Sumu could feel that this resistance came from the depths of the plane, as if some ancient power was resisting the rebalancing of spiritual power. Sumu gritted his teeth. He knew that he couldn't give up at this time. He once again mobilized all the spiritual power in his body, integrated it with the reverse, time spiritual power, and formed an even more powerful force, trying to break through this resistance. With his efforts, the reverse, time spiritual power was like a sharp blade, cutting through that resistance bit by bit. Finally, with Sumu's unremitting efforts, the resistance was successfully broken through, and the powerful spiritual power smoothly flowed into each key node. The space-time fluctuations of the plane completely subsided, the space returned to stability, and everything returned to calm. Sumu slumped to the ground in exhaustion, his clothes soaked with sweat. This series of challenges had exhausted his physical strength and spiritual power, but he had successfully saved this plane. The guardian walked up to him, his eyes full of approval and gratitude, and said, "You've done it, Sumo. Not only have you repaired the spiritual power core, but you've also stabilized the entire plane. You're the hero of this plane." Sumu smiled faintly and said weakly, "This is what I should do. But how can I leave this plane now?" The guardian said, "After the spiritual power core is repaired, the passage between the plane and the outside world will reopen. You just need to follow the main passage of the castle, and you can find the teleportation gate to leave. But before leaving, you might as well explore other parts of the castle. Maybe you can find something useful to you." Sumu nodded. After a short rest, he stood up and decided to follow the guardian's advice and explore this mysterious castle once again before leaving. The story continues. More exciting content is yet to come. Subscribe as soon as possible.